Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. George Sisler, I got his book, The Sisler. Hall of Fame. Played from 1915 to 1930. I'm covering his box scores, all his accomplishments. And by looking at all his seasons, I marvel at this guy. I'm curious. How did he maintain 340 career batting average? How did he get 2,812 hits in 15 years? How did he do it? Well, you got to look at each season, you got to look at each box score, and then evaluate it. This video, 1920 season, do you know what happened that year? George Sisler produced the greatest hitting season of all time. Number one. Now, I'm not saying the greatest overall season as far as looking at all the categories. I'm saying the greatest base hit season and batting average of all time. Now, you may say there are other guys that have a higher season batting average. Yes. But let me give you a trivia question. See if you can answer it. Which player played every game of the season and had the highest batting average in history for a season? The answer is George Sisler. What do I mean? Well, back in the 1920s, they played a 154 game season. George Sisler that year played every game. And what did he do? He got 257 hits, a record at the time, and he batted .407. Now, what do I mean by saying that he got the greatest hitting season of all time? Well, he got 257 hits in 154 games. Nobody else was able to do that. So that's number one. Now, Ichiro Suzuki did get 262 hits one year, but that was a 162 game season. So he had 8 more games to get 5 more hits than Sisler. 262. So I don't count that season as the greatest of all time as far as hit. He holds the record most hits in a season, but it took 162 games. George Sisler, 257 hits in 154 games. Whoa. And Sisler batted .407. What did Ichiro do when he got the 262 hits? I've got it here. 262. He did it in the 2004 season, and he batted .372. See, he didn't bat .407. So Sisler has the edge of getting the most hits in 154 games, and he gets the .407, which was the highest batting average in history of a player who played every game for the season. Following me? What do I mean? Okay, we know other guys have higher batting average seasons. Hugh Duffy in 1894 batted .440. So that's better than the .407. But here's my question. How many games? He didn't play every game that year. He played 125 games. So that is 29 games less than what Sisler did to get to the .407. If Hugh Duffy had played 154 games and batted .440, he would be number one, but he didn't do it. 125 games. So Sisler, the highest batting average for a guy who played every game of the season. You may say, are there other guys who played every game of the season and had a higher than .407? I couldn't find anybody. There are other guys who've had 400 batting seasons. Let's look at Nap Lajoie. 1 year he batted 426, but 131 games. See, didn't play the whole year. So Sisler still holds it 407 in 154 games. You may ask, what about Wheelie Keeler's 424? All right, let's look when he did it. Played 129 games. See, not 154. So he's out. You may say, what about Rogers Hornsby's 424? Yeah, I remember the year, 1924. How many games? 143. That's second closest. He missed 9 games. No, 11 games. If he had played every game that year and batted 424, then he would hold it, but he doesn't. Following me? You may ask, how about Ty Cobb's 419 season? All right, let's look at it. How many games? 146. So he's close. He missed 8 games. Would he have been down to 407 if he had played the extra 8 games? I don't think so. So he would have been number 1, but he didn't play the full season. My question was, which player played every game of the season and had the highest batting average of all time? The answer is George Sisler's 407 in 1920 because he played 154 games. Is there anybody else we should consider that maybe had a better 407? Well, let's look at Sam Thompson in the Hall of Fame. 1 year he batted 415. Sorry, 102 games. Doesn't qualify for me as far as every game of the season. There's another guy. Let's see. Joe Jackson had a 408, which would beat Sisler's 407. Did Joe Jackson play the entire year when he got the 408? Close, 147 games. He didn't get to the 154. There's one other guy we can consider. His name is Jesse Burkett. He batted a 410. How many games? 133. Doesn't do it. And there's one other guy I got to look at. Ed Delante had a 410 also. Did he play 154? Close, 146. See where I'm getting at? 154 games. Who has the highest batting average of all time? The answer, George Sisler. Number 1 all time. If you play every game of the season, who had the highest batting average? His 407 in 1920 does it. So let's see how he did for the 1920 season. 154 games, 631 at-bats, and you bat 407. How about that? 631. 137 runs scored. I like it. Why? Because it's the first year over 100 runs scored for Sisler. 257 hits. 49 doubles. 18 triples, 19 homers. What a year. 122 RBIs. That's the first time over 100 RBIs. 42 stolen bases, 46 walks, 407 batting, on base, 449. Slugging, this is his highest. 632. This would be the highest for his career. 632. And total bases, 399. Oh, man, he just missed 400, right? One extra base, one measly single, bunt single, infield single, whatever. He would have got to 400 total bases. He finishes with 399. His best hitting streak that year, 1920, 25 games. He had 75 multi-hit games. Is that the record? No. I think there are some players that got more. Tris Speaker, I think, had a 78 one year, multi-hit games. And I think Ty Cobb had 180 multi-hit season. So he's close. 33 two-hit games. 30 three-hit games. That, I think, is a record. Did you know that one? Who had the most three-hit games in one season? Not overall in the career, but in one season. The answer? Tris Speaker had 33 three-hit games one year. 12 four-hit games. That's a record. Is there anybody else who had more four-hit games in one season than Tris Speaker? Nope. I couldn't find anybody. I'd have to do more research. 12 four-hit games. Incredible. So he holds the record, 257 hits in a 154-game season. He holds that record. He has 30 three-hit games in 1 year. That's a record. And 12 four-hit games in 1 year. That's a record. 21 games, 2 runs scored. 9 games, 3 runs scored. 2 games, 4 runs scored. He had 15 2 RBI games, 9 3 RBI games, and 3 4 RBI games. What can we say about Tris Speaker's 1920 batting season? It has to rank as one of the great. You have to rank it the number 1 greatest hitting season of all time, as far as hitting. Now, the overall greatest season of all time would be different. Why? Because a guy would get, in fact, I can tell you who had the greatest offensive season of all time, because you're looking at all the categories. Do you know who the answer is? I want to make it clear. I'm making a distinction. Greatest offensive season of all time is all the categories across the board, which includes, I'll name the categories: runs scored, hits, doubles, triples, homers, RBIs, stolen bases, walks, fewer strikeouts, batting average, on base, slugging, and total bases. That's across the board offensive season. As far as the greatest hitting season of all time, I'm going to give it to George Sisler. And what do I mean by the distinction between offensive and then the hitting? The hitting is just how many base hits and your average. Those two things. George Sisler's 257 hits and his 407 batting average in every game he played that year. Now, you want to know the answer to the question, who had the greatest offensive season of all time? You think it's Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Ty Cobb, Jimmy Fox, Ted Williams? Offensive season of all time. I looked it up. It's not Babe Ruth. What do I mean? You know who it is? As far as 1 year. Across the board, offensively, all the way across. Rogers Hornsby has the greatest, number 1, and he beat out the Babe, and I'll prove it. All right, I've got Rogers Hornsby's. Let's see, I'll put it right here. Here he is. Yep, this year, 1922. Listen to these numbers across the board. He played every game that year. He got a 401, so he didn't beat out George Sisler's 407. Sisler holds the record, 154 games, 407. But Roger Hornsby had 401 in 154 games. Okay, so that's one stop. He had 141 runs scored. Now that's better than obviously George Sisler did. 250 hits. So he's got 141 runs scored and 250 hits. This is 1 year. He had 46 doubles, 14 triples, 42 homers, 40-40 in the doubles and homers. He had 152 runs batted in. Then he just had only 65 strikeouts. He had a 459 on base. Listen to this. 722 slugging. And he finishes it off with 450 total bases. So you want me to add this up? Let's add it up. All right, 141 runs scored plus 250 hits. 152 runs batted in. I'm just going to do 5 categories. He gets 401 and he gets 450 total bases. That is a score of 1,394. No one else beat that number in those 5 categories. Now, he had the other categories of the homers and doubles. I'm not going to add all that up. It's too many categories. I just did the 5 categories. Now, you may say, did Babe Ruth beat the number 1394 in one of his best seasons all time? Well, let's type in Babe Ruth and see if he did it. What was his best season all time? As far as across the board in those 5 categories. All right, I've got a pretty good year right here. 1921 for Babe Ruth. Let's add it up. All right, I've got the 1394 for Hornsby. Hornsby has 1394 in those 5 categories. Runs scored, hits, RBIs, batting average, and total bases. Babe Ruth's best year was not the 60-homer season. That was a good year. But he had a better output in 1922. No, 1921. Sorry. 1921 season for Babe Ruth is his best. Why? First category, 177 runs scored. Woo! 204 hits. He had 168 RBIs. He batted .378, and he had 457 total bases. You know what that number is? 1384. And what number did I say that Roger Hornsby had? 1394. He beat him by 10. How about that? The only other guy who could put up the numbers, well, you may say, what about Ruth's 1927 season when he had 158 runs scored, 165 RBIs. He had a 356 and had 100, and he had 417 total bases. He doesn't reach the 1394 that Hornsby had. So Babe Ruth's 1921 season was his best of all time as far as stats across the board. You may ask, how about Lou Gehrig? Did he have a season that gets up to 1,394 in the 5 categories? Well, what was Lou Gehrig's best year? How about that year where he got 185 RBIs? So let's look at it. The year is 1931. How did he do? 163 runs scored, 211 hits, good. 185 RBIs, that's good. 341 average. And he had 410 total bases. He came close, but fell short. 1,310. So Hornsby is number 1 in the 5 categories. 1,394. Ruth, 1,384. And then Lou Gehrig would be number 3 at 1,310. I could not find anybody else who had a year as incredible as Rogers Hornsby. Now you say, what about Sisler's 257 hits season? Well, you want to add it up? Just since we're on George Sisler, where does he rank? Did he get up to 1,300? He's not beating Hornsby. All right, 1920 for George Sisler, 137 runs scored, 257 hits, 122 RBIs, 407 average, and he had 399 total bases. 1,322. So he's number 3. Gehrig is number 4. 1,322, pretty good for Sisler. Anybody else you can think of that had a season that would reach 1,300 total score in the 5 categories? I don't know. Let's see. Ichiro don't do it because he doesn't have the total bases and the RBIs and the runs scored, even though he has 262 hits, so he wouldn't do it. You have to look for other guys who have gotten more than 250 hits in a season, or maybe 240, 250. Let's do this. I'll go to Baseball Reference, career hits leaders, and we'll go to hits in a season. All right, let's see. Single season. I've got it on my screen. All right, Lefty O'Doul had 254 hits 1 year, but he falls short. I can add up his numbers just for the fun of it. His 1929 season, 152 runs scored, 152 plus 254 in hits, 122 RBI. He had a 398 average, and he had 397 total bases. 1,323. You know what? That just beat Sisler. I didn't even know that. So he's number 3 so far. So you've got O'Doul, 1,323. You got Sisler, 1,322. You got Gehrig, 1,310. You got Ruth at 1,384. Hornsby, 1,394. 5 categories. Is there anybody else we can think of? All right, well, if we go to single season, Bill Terry had 254 hits 1 year. How did he do? I could just tell. He'll fall short, but we can add up his numbers. All right. The year he had 254 hits, he had 139 runs scored, 254 in hits, 129 RBIs. He batted .401, and he had 392 total bases. So that's 1,315. Okay? Does not reach Hornsby's 1394. All right, let's see if there's anybody else. Al Simmons had 253 hits one year. How did he do for the year? 253. All right, we'll add them up. 122 runs scored, 253 hits, 129 RBIs. He bats 387 for the year, and he gets 392 total bases. That didn't even reach 1,300, so he won't do it. It was 1,283. Is there anybody else? There's a guy named Chuck Klein had 250 hits one year. How did he do that year? Ooh, I didn't realize this. Chuck Klein had a good year. 158 runs scored, 250 hits, 170 RBIs. Whoa. 386 average. And he had 445 total bases. 1,409. He just beat Hornsby. I'm shocked. I didn't even know it. I thought Hornsby was number one. I just found out that Chuck Klein had a year for the record books in 5 categories. 1,409. Chuck Klein, 1930 season, is the best among the 5 categories I mentioned: runs scored, hits, RBIs, average, and total bases. 1,409. I'm shocked. I didn't realize it. I got to do more research. All right, there's one other guy I want to look at. Ty Cobb had 248 hits one year. We'll look to see how he did. He's not going to reach it, but we'll give you the numbers. 148 runs scored, 248 in hits, 127 RBI, 419 average, and he gets 367 total bases. 1,309 for Cobb. I don't think there's anybody else who had a year for the ages. Got Babe Herman, no. Henny Manouche, no. Carew, no. Delonte. I look at Delonte and see he had 238 hits one year. He's not going to do it because he had 130. I'll give you the number on Delonte just for the fun of it. 135 in runs scored, 238 in hits, 137 RBIs, bats 410. He had 338 total bases. Yeah, 1,258. Not even close. So here's the order, and by doing my own research, forgot about a guy named Chuck Klein. He's in the Hall of Fame. Maybe I'll do something on him as far as box scores. Here's the order. 5 categories. Follow me closely. Which player had the best numbers in 5 categories of all time in a single season? The answer, Chuck Klein. Just to give you what he did, here he is. The 1930 season goes down as the greatest of all time as far as 5 category numbers: runs scored, hits, RBIs, batting average, and total bases. Those 5. Who's number 1? Chuck Klein. 1,409 is his score. Because what he did in 1930, here it is. He had 158 runs scored, 250 hits, 170 RBIs. He batted 386, and he had 445 total bases. That is a score of 1,409. Number 1 all time. Number 2, Roger Hornsby, 1,394. Number 3, Babe Ruth, 1,384. Number 4, Lefty O'Doul, 1,323. Number 5, George Sisler, 1,322. Number 6, Bill Terry, 1,315. Number 7, Lou Gehrig, 1,310. Number 8, Ty Cobb, 1,309. Those are the top 8 as far as those 5 categories. Now, who had the greatest offensive season of all time across the board? I'll get into that at another time. It could be Babe Ruth because he had the 60 homers and he had pretty good year there. He had the doubles and the triples and the stolen bases, and you got to consider the on base and slugging. As far as that number going across the board, that's going to take some research. All right, I'm done with the 1920 season. I was very much impressed with George Sisler. And that question still has the same answer. Who had the greatest batting average season of all time by playing every game of the season? And the answer is George Sisler's 407 in 154 games in 1920. All right, I'm done with this video. Next video, 1921 season. Talk to you later. Officially, I'm out.